Okay, I'm live. And I sent the link over to Mitchell, and he should be joining us shortly. Looking forward to this conversation. And hopefully, some of you folks are as well. Got a lot to discuss. And it's all pertaining to the topic, the subject matter that's really near and dear to my heart, and that is libertarianism. Liberty, what it's all about, the Libertarian Party of Canada, Mitchell's role within it, uh, you know, what are the state of liberty in this country? I mean, that's a big old topic right there, right? And what we can do, what we can expect to bring about more liberty in this country for the future, the immediate future, the near future, and hopefully for the long term as well. Things are a little up and down. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride these days. I noticed it myself. Some days I'm up and optimistic, other days not so much, just depending on the news cycle, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's constant, whether you're being gaslit or, manipulated, or I mean, it's just constant. It's basically a constant mind fuck, but whatever. We work through it. We power through it. Okay. I wonder. Just one sec here. Actually, why don't I bring up the Libertarian Party of Canada? There we go. Okay, we got the platform. Okay, that should do. That should do right there. I guess while I'm waiting, actually, now that I'm on the Libertarian Party page, let me just mention this on the front page. Basically, a mission statement or whatever for the party. The mission of the Libertarian Party of Canada is to reduce the responsibilities and expense of government. This so that we may each manage our lives to mutually fulfill our needs by the free and voluntary exchange of our efforts and property for the value that best realizes our happiness. Sounds pretty reasonable to me. That's the hilarious part, right? The way the establishment hacks in the media or the establishment politicians, right? The ruling class, the way they go on about libertarians, the kind of lies and rhetoric and misinformation that they spew towards libertarians, people that just care about freedom and liberty. And actually, not just care about freedom and liberty, but have an entire principled structure and platform that's universally consistent, right? That protects each and everyone, or at least has the baseline initiative to protect each and all of us from each other, right? Because we never know what. I mean, come on, look at what we're seeing today. A lot of political division, identity politics. If government, was at least at the very least now, my concentration on the thing is, that's what do we need it for anyways? But hey, even if we can bring it, down to the night watchman state or anything, the minimalist, the minarchist state, right? I mean, come on. But you would at the very least, bare minimum, a lot of this political division and rhetoric and the hatred and all that stuff that we've been dealing with for so long, that would be greatly diminished. Why? Because we wouldn't have to be overly concerned. If the power of government was massively shrunk, right, and it wasn't such a direct threat to each and every one of our lives, we wouldn't have to be worrying about what other people's ideological perspectives or opinions are. We wouldn't have to worry about the mob coming to take away our rights or freedoms because they wouldn't have that power, that authority, or that capacity, right? Anyways, I see Mitchell is joined now. I'm just going to bring him into the stream. How's it going today, Mitchell?
How are you, Ben? It's been a while. Been about a year.
Yes, it's been quite a while for sure. Yeah. For me in particular. Well, sorry, go ahead, man.
I think it was right before the federal election in 2021 the last time we talked over stream.
Probably. I don't know about yourself, but me, I got to a point where I had to take a little time off. I kind of dipped my toes back in the water a little bit here and there, but I felt like I was getting overwhelmed, you know what I mean? Getting too immersed in it. So I did take a little break, and I tell you, it was actually a benefit. Kind of focused and concentrated on my own personal life and, in my immediate community and stuff. And I got to tell you, I feel much more invigorated now for doing so. And it's not like when I came back, it's not like nothing has really changed.
Nothing's changed.
Right. Yeah, the statists are still stating, right? Libertarians still trying to free people, and then the indoctrinated or the illogical masses for some reason just keep saying, no, I don't want freedom. No, it's too scary for some reason. But we're making inroads, at least in some regard. That's the thing too, is I don't know about yourself, but I think my thought process is, even right now in these recent days, is it's kind of like a roller coaster ride, because I see what Elon Musk is attempting to do with Twitter, and I get quite positive in some of the successes that he's been making, but then on the very next day you see just so much negativity, and so it's kind of an up and down roller coaster. But anyways, never mind about what me and my experience. My big thing, and this whole thing with this interview today, is it's all about you and, of course, the Libertarian Party of Canada. And I'm really glad to hear that now you have actually become not just part of the Libertarian Party of Canada, but you're now the regional coordinator? Is that what you are?
Regional director for Atlantic Canada.
Right on. Yeah, that's awesome. So that's going to include all the Atlantic provinces, which is really important. And of course, I don't know if you don't even really want to get into it, because to me that's more, I don't know, it would be seem more gossipy. But if it's something you want to get off your chest or anything, if you want to bring anything up about the PPC and as to why you've changed your affiliations with the party, or if not, we could just
we can discuss it. So in May, Max did his maritime tour, which covered not Newfoundland, but did cover New Brunswick first, then PEI, and then into Nova Scotia.
Right.
So I helped cover that, organize that, work the executives, that sort of thing. Something I've always done. And then they had got back to Ottawa after the tour, and they had called me and said they wanted to do some structural changes and move some people around, and they were removing some coordinators from their roles. So I thought about it for a while, and my initial plan was to just stay on and run King's Hands, which is the riding I'm in.
Right.
And then I thought about it, and I'm like, I don't take steps back. I don't believe in taking less responsibility. Right. I've been in federal politics for a long time, provincial politics. I have a lot to offer. So I thought about it. I said, no, I just kind of stayed silent politically for 7 months. I wasn't active on Facebook. I wasn't really active on Twitter. And then I believe it was middle of November, I was kind of getting the itch again to get involved again politically. And I reached out to one person I knew in the Libertarian Party, and they got me in contact with the president of the party and the leader of the party. This was a little bit of discussion over Facebook. They want to know my background and kind of what I did previously in other federal elections provincially. And then I kind of just stepped into the role of regional director. And it's very similar to what I did as provincial coordinator. It's almost identical. Building the grassroots, getting riding association set up, get the Libertarian Party's name in Atlantic Canada. It's very quiet. Obviously, I did some research earlier today. So for PEI, they've only ever had one Libertarian candidate. That was in 1979. In Newfoundland, they've only ever had one candidate actually run during a federal election. That was in 1984 in St. John's East. They did run two by-elections in 2013 and 2017. And for New Brunswick, they ran a candidate in Fredericton in 1980, 2019, 2021. And then in St. John, they ran 1988, 1984, and 1980. And there has not been a Libertarian candidate in Nova Scotia since 1988. And it was in Dartmouth, Cole Harbour, Halifax, and in the South Shore. So there's a lot of work to do, but I've already reached out to some of the membership. I'm having meetings in the new year to get riding associations set up. explain to them how riding associations work, the structure. So I'll be traveling across Nova Scotia early in probably, I'm going to say January, February. Go to Halifax area, get an association set up there, Cape Breton, all across the province. Later in the year into New Brunswick, PEI, and then hopefully Newfoundland late summer, early fall. And that's kind of my plan. And there's a couple of people, I don't want to mention names, that were part of the Conservative Party of Canada and the People's Party that are libertarians, and they're not happy with either party, and they've kind of, some of them have been not involved politically for a while, but I reached out to them and they're going to come on board and help me. I'm not sure in what capacity yet. I'm not sure if they're going to be executives or just kind of be campaign type people when elections start. But I am bringing a team with me.
Nice.
I am realistic. I don't expect, an MP coming out of Atlantic Canada right away for the Libertarian Party. I would like to have at least 75 to 85% of the ridings in Atlantic Canada have a Libertarian candidate. And I would be happy with 2-3% of the vote for the first go. It's going to take a while to get, you're starting from almost the bottom and working it back up. Right. So I can't expect, I'm not going to be unrealistic and say we're going to get 10-15% of the vote. I don't want to get people's hopes up.
Yeah.
But 2 to 3% would be a heck of an achievement.
Well, listen, I'll just mention this off the top of my head as far as that goes, because like you say, the Libertarian Party in and itself, pretty low key in Atlantic Canada, I'll admit that, of course. But what I will stress is not necessarily the Libertarian Party per se, but I will say at least in New Brunswick, the province that I live in, we have, you might even be familiar with it's still in existence now. Someone else within the party basically brought it back to life after Chris Dawson basically disbanded it after he crossed the floor and joined the CPC. But I got to tell you, they actually at one point in time, I think it was a couple elections ago, they went from 3 down to 2, but they at their peak, they had 3 sitting MPs in the legislature here in New Brunswick, which now their platform obviously wasn't, copy and paste Libertarian Party. Obviously there's discrepancies different, but what it did tell me, what it did show me is at least in some ridings, some particular ridings in New Brunswick, they are at play for at least some external, some challenger that's not representative of the status quo. That is definitely, there's at least, I would say 3 to 4 ridings in this province that if you actively work, because what's the party I was just mentioning? Anyways, Chris Dawson's there, the People's Alliance, they didn't have a whole lot of time from the inception of the party till the time they started gaining seats. It was actually in fairly quick order, a few years. So
and they did grow pretty quickly. Like you said, they did get 3 seats and they went down to 2. And then Chris Austin and Michelle Conroy, I think is her name, they crossed over to the PCs. And then an old MLA, I can't remember his name, Rick something. He started the party up again.
Right. Yeah, well, see, and that's the thing. And what I'm thinking of is, the kind of people, which obviously was a substantial number of the people in those ridings that chose to, put the status quo on the back burner and actually give this new upstart party, give them a chance, right? Even though the like your Chris Dawson's, even though they've crossed the party and basically given up on their independent venture, the people that voted for them, well, obviously they voted them for a reason, and they are still there. And we've had quite a little bit of time and some things that have happened in between too. So I'm pretty sure those people have probably gained a few more support, or those writings have garnered and gained even more supporters. So I think you would actually have a decent chance of that. And I will definitely see what I can do to help out in my own situation, because I really do believe that this is the time. Actually, I was even thinking about this before we were going live, Mitchell, is I think what it is, people like myself and even people like yourself, well, I'll speak for myself in particular. I started doing this stuff about 11, 12 years ago. And I think what it was is really, you're just too far out in front of where society in general was in terms of libertarianism, the philosophy of liberty, what all this stuff even entails. Well, we've had, I know me in particular, I've had at least, 10, 12 years now of seeing that it's become more, even now, even if I'm listening to CBC radio, it surprises me. Now, usually it's in negative manners, but I'm even hearing quite a few times that term libertarian being
Yeah.
bandied around. And even with conservatives now, this is something I will want to point out is, and I'm not trying to cause any division here, but the conservatives for me, and which is why I'm really appreciative of what you're doing now, because what I've been watching, because as you know, I pay attention astutely, is it seems that the conservatives, nothing against conservatives in general, but I'm just saying it just seems that they want to take over and they want to, just like what I kind of perceived as what the PBC did. Seems the CPC is kind of ripping a page out of Max's playbook, and Pierre Poilievre in particular, and use that populist sentiment, that kind of grassroots movement, your typical truck or even convoy type people, to now claim that they're the ones, that it's conservatives and libertarians and we're so closely aligned and stuff. And the beautiful thing about you going to the Libertarian Party is you don't have to play on that it's libertarians and the right-wing conservatives anymore. Because to me, what I've always said is, as closely aligned as conservatives may be with some libertarians, usually on economic issues, perhaps, right?
Socially, they're not the same.
Exactly. Liberals, I have way more in common with a liberal, right?
Well, a real liberal, not a Justin Trudeau liberal.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why I say liberal, not progressive or, the woke brigade, right? But an actual classical liberal, someone that actually identifies in liberal in the classical sense, I have a lot more in common with them, actually, in terms of, social policies, in terms of freedom and liberty in that manner. So that's the thing about the Libertarian Party, is you don't have to play this game where you're just going to cozy up to one side of the political aisle or divide. You're standing firm on your own principles. And that's the one thing about the Libertarian Party, whether you're talking Canada or the US, is there's a long standing, there's decades and decades of universally consistent message in the platform. Little tweaks here or there, but it's still the basic message is consistent. Yeah, basic message is, listen, let's get government out of the way. Yeah. And I even was saying that earlier. Let's put which is government is basically metaphorically the big gun in the room. Let's just put the gun away and let's sit down like adults and talk to each other. And that's really what's got to take place, because when you look at all the division, I watch what's kind of taking place on Twitter and stuff. Everyone's paranoid. Who's going to take over the realm or the controls of power? Well, if you put, based on the Libertarian Party philosophy, the minarchist, put it contain it within the night watchman state, even as much as I'd like to go further, but even in the night watchman state, well, that puts us all in a pretty good position. And we don't have to constantly be looking over our shoulder and being concerned with our fellow countrymen or women are thinking or perceiving, or what kind of ideas they want to impose on us. Then we can sit back, kind of take a few breathers, and maybe we can even work better, because humans work much better when you're not under such extreme pressure and monotony all the time in terms of division and rhetoric. I think we could have ourselves a really good chance of bringing about the kind of societies we want. Now, it's going to take a while, but at the very least, the basis of that is to, let's get government out of our way as much as humanly possible.
And I think that starts, people like you and I have, it took me longer to come to the libertarian side of things. I was, late 20s. I was like a diehard conservative, like rah Stephen Harper type. But then you do more reading, you get better read, you kind of deep dive yourself, and you kind of figure out what your important issues are. And then the social issues is like, just let them go. Like, let people be who they are, get the government out of the bedroom, get the government out of, your marriage. Like, just the government should be very minimal. And then obviously with libertarians in any circle, there's debates on how much government, or, and for me, it's like, governments protect the borders. We have a strong, like, military as in defense. We're not invading people, like, right. But the courts should be somewhat government regulated, but I think the judges should be elected, not appointed. The police force, I think the RCMP should be scaled back. I think we should have more local police force. Yeah. And the people in charge of those police forces are elected, not appointed. Like, there's no, like, I don't know there's no, like, the people have no say who's policing them. Right? I'm not saying like we need to be policed like an authoritarian state, but there has to be some sort of minimal protection there if, someone breaks into your house or something. But like, the budget the RCMP has and how long it takes for them to respond, and all the bureaucracy and the unions that protect them, it's ridiculous.
And because it's a federal entity, it gets captured by federal politics too, right? And it completely destroys anything in terms of your localities. Because I believe the same thing. Now, historically, the RCMP, used to be, at the very least, most members of the community, especially in rural communities, were people that were local. But like you say, it's become so bureaucratized, and so many of the good people that used to be within the ranks, and because it has fallen so far, the good people usually, if you're a good, decent person, you're going to flee an organization that's turning more corrupt, right? So we're seeing now, standards have greatly fallen, and it's so centrally controlled. Once again, just like with anything in the marketplace, well, policing would be the same thing. If you have different models, well, you can see which model is going to be more beneficial to the community by having different options. And that's one thing about local police forces. And if they're a local police force, anything local is much more, or at least in theory, and I think even in practice, is much easier to hold to account, right? Rather than some bureaucratic nightmare that comes from Ottawa. I agree with you there. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm not sure where I don't know if it was on Reddit or Twitter, but Cumberland County here in Nova Scotia, which would go from about Amherst to Truro and then all the way almost to like the Nova Scotia PEI border, they're trying to get like their own Cumberland County police force, because Truro has their own police force. I'm not sure if Amherst is RCMP or like Amherst Police Force. They're trying to get the whole county to have a decentralized, just local police force.
Excellent. Well,
it should be it should be everywhere, because you can't just centrally plan everything in Ottawa. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and because of the RCMP, their roles over the year, and because it is the federal police, their roles have been expanded to the point where it's not even it's basically almost like the CIA, the FBI. No, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just that its tentacles are pretty much everywhere. Whereas at the end of the day, what people in every community across this country, all they really require, like you say, is to have a force of people who are there to protect and help those who are in grave or dire situations or under threat of violence or theft and stuff like that. And yes, there's no reason whatsoever why that would have to come down as a one size fits all approach. Once again, from Ottawa, which as most people have seen today, especially after the protests and stuff, these organizations have become very much corrupted, and they've done some things that, well, I mean, I won't even get into all the different stories I've had to deal with over the years with the RCMP, but yes, definitely the thing that we could do. And the thing about a lot of people, when libertarians, as much as I'm a big fan of, all the great people that say, let's end the Fed, end this, or defund the police. Hey, I was on board for a while. But I think the best thing, and that libertarian policy, that approach through the Libertarian Party and the kind of initiatives you're suggesting, it doesn't put that much fear, at least in your typical older population. It's like, what are you talking about? Defund the police. I need to be protected, right? So I can understand where that would be a much better approach, to tell your grandma, oh no, don't worry, we're not going to eliminate the cops, right? No, we just want to have local police that serve our communities, know what's best for the communities, know how best to police the communities or to protect the citizens or people within those communities. And I think that, like I say, who wouldn't? Well, I mean, there may be some special interest groups, but I would suggest most, whether it's Atlantic Canadians or just regular Canadians or Canadians across the entire country, I think they would all agree, yeah, as long as we have a police force that's going to be held accountable and do their job, well, what kind of badge or design of their badge doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's can they do the job that I require and demand of them for my tax dollars?
And I think, and I agree, like we need like more police force, like in a sense of like localized. But I think one thing that I was thinking about earlier is, to some people, like when you mentioned libertarianism, they think it's just complete anarchy. Like they think it's just like there's no government at all, there's no police force, you can just buy your way to the top, there's no contractual agreements. And like when you say taxation is theft, and then how are we going to pay for things without taxes? And it scares a lot of people, right? Because it's not a mainstream idea of where a tax is going to go. But I'm still like, I think if we're going to have any taxes at all, 5%, and it should be just to have defense, military, police force, and maybe like judges that are, appointed. Then we'd have, money to pay like MPs and things like that, but not to the extent that they're paid now. I mean, it's like $330 billion is what Canada pays government officials.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy, right?
So if you got rid of the vast majority of all the bureaucracy and red tape, and you could cut it down to about 30 billion.
Oh, for sure.
And
Just give me,
yeah.
yeah, no, I just wanted to, sorry there. I just noticed I got a donation. I just wanted to acknowledge there real quick. Les Charat, $20. Thank you very much, Les Charat. I really appreciate the donation. Keep up the good work. It matters for sure. It does. It really does. Thank you kindly once again. But anyways, back to what we were discussing there, Mitchell.
And I have a couple people, like I said to me, they're not really aware of the Libertarian Party or what libertarianism is. And I had a couple people look through and they're like, you want to get rid of old age pension and like all that. And they're like, but how are the old people going to survive? And it's not like, but you didn't read the second paragraph. We're not saying like, if we cut the taxes, that money, like the government's not taking that money from you.
Right.
You can do what you want with it. So you could have a private company or a bank put a retirement fund in there with a better rate of return. So the government's not just leveraging your money and then saying, you know, here's some crumbs, right? It's not, we're not saying like kill off the old people because they're not working. It's get the government out of that business they have no business being in and allow people or even educate people on here's where you can put your money in a bank. As much as I hate central banks, you know, we can get into decentralization of banks, but at least put it somewhere privately where the government doesn't have their thumb all over it, right? Or at all would be better, but
no, I agree 100%. And like there's so many aspects of that in terms of the economics of it is yes, people should, it's that money. Obviously, if you're concerned about where your money's going, well, obviously who's in better control, who should be in better control and care of your money than yourself. Right? If you want to make sure that it's going where you want to go, then that's the point of private charity or voluntary interactions is we can hold each other to account because they are voluntary by sheer fact that they're voluntary interactions. And these contracts or anything that we enter into voluntarily, you have that ability to withdraw. Whereas the government, you don't have no ability or capacity to withdraw. So yes, if you're concerned about where your money's going, I mean, whether you're talking about people on the left or right, people on the left complain tirelessly about government spending money, you know, for certain initiatives, and same with people on the left. And I would say to both, right and left. Well, if you had the ability, the capacity to keep your money, retain it for yourself rather than government taking it and dictating, determine where it goes.
And no credibility of where your money's actually going. There's no transparency.
Exactly. And of course, no guarantee of any kind of, especially if, like you say, if you want to make sure you're getting some kind, even a return on your investment. Well, you can't know that if you place that in some institution that doesn't have to be held to account. Whereas, you know, in a private entity, that's the whole point of the private companies. The private company has no pretense, and no Canadian believes that a company, a business, a corporation, nobody believes that they have any authority to do the things that governments do. So that obviously gives them a much better position in terms of the people that are on the lower end of the power scale. Now you are on equal footing with the corporation because you've entered into a contractual obligation. Whereas with government, you're always going to be the little guy. They're always going to be able to trounce on you and basically get away with doing whatever they want.
I mean, God forbid, say you work, you know, you start working when you're 20, you retire at 55, and then God forbid you pass away. So all that money you just gave to the government, it just disappears. No one gets it. So at least if you had it in a private account, you could say, if anything happens to me, this amount of money goes to this person, this amount of money goes to this person, go to your family, whoever you want it to. At least you're controlling your money. It's not just being thrown away, essentially, or going to someone else that you don't even know who they are. Like your money's just being thrown in a big pot. Sorry, you paid your tax for 30 years. You died a year after you're retired. Sorry, your money's gone.
Yeah. Well, listen, Mitchell, I have another question that I really, a really important question that I wanted to ask you, though, as it pertains. Because one thing I have noticed about, like, you know, politics, and you've heard, I think you've even said it, we've all probably said it a few times ourselves. And I think it was Andrew Breitbart that coined the phrase, but basically how politics is downstream of culture. So I'm really happy that you're active in the politics. But my question would be, because I think this is some area where maybe the Libertarian Party and maybe some of the candidates and some of the coordinators and some of the people that are, you know, insiders is maybe failing at is what's the Libertarian Party a candidate? What are you or anyone else within the party doing in terms of driving the culture? So here's the thing, you know, whether it's a barbecue or putting on just some kind of event, right? And that's to bring people together, right? And then the politics can kind of, there's a way of getting people interested in things without just having to deal with politics all the time. You can get the same messaging out at a barbecue, just people standing around talking with each other rather than just having to go to a political meeting somewhere, or, right? So that's a big thing for me, is how are libertarians, maybe hiring some people who are maybe more on the artistic side of things and bring in like that kind of like maybe even pop culture, or maybe doing some little skits or comedy or just things, like I say, that drive our culture, because that's one area where the establishment, they have their tentacles everywhere. So what can the Libertarian Party do? What can they do? What do they hopefully possibly plan on doing to try to bring that kind of culture of liberty, make the politics stick, right?
I've had I've been brainstorming. That was actually a conversation I had with a couple people within the Libertarian Party. Is, they kind of asked me, like, how do we get this thing to take off and get more recognized? And my first reaction was, well, we need riding associations. We need local. So if whatever riding you're in Atlantic Canada, you can go somewhere and talk to somebody. Doesn't have to be a meeting. It just has to be someone that their face, or where their office is, or where they're at, or you can send a text message, a phone call, meet up, have a coffee, and talk, and then bring more people. It doesn't have to be like this official, Libertarian Party Association meeting. But I would dive deeper into that and say, we have to somehow, and I mentioned this previously, we have to somehow get into the school system and educate students at an appropriate age of what libertarianism is.
Right.
Because you can't expect, it's not, well, it is the school. And the schools are government funded, so I can get why they don't want widespread libertarianism blasted all through the school system, because they want essentially you to be a drone to society, right? They don't want you to be entirely free. They want you just free enough where your nose is above water. You're like, oh, hey, I'm free, but by the way, we're going to take your tax money. You can't travel if you're not vaccinated. Oh, that's been lifted. You can't do this. You can't do this. So if we get into an appropriate age group, I would say, middle school, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids, get someone that represents the party, or even someone that would be a libertarian. Maybe they work for a think tank or something, or have worked for a think tank. Get them to go to the school, do a presentation, or hold town hall meetings. It doesn't have to be party branded, and just say, hey, here's what libertarianism really is. Bring your kids out. We'll have, pop and snacks, and, you can have refreshments and food and stuff. Right. And start there. And I'm hoping, I haven't discussed it too much with headquarters, but I'm hoping that I have a plan to get libertarian student clubs in universities all across Atlantic Canada.
Excellent.
I'll start locally, like Acadia is close to me. I don't expect a warm reception, but there are libertarians there. I have talked to them.
Well, might I make a recommendation to you there, Mitchell? If you're really serious on that, and I tried dipping my toes a little bit in the water there, but it was one of those times early on, and I was just spreading myself way too thin, so I basically gave up on that venture. But I even tried to start in our own little chapter of the Canadian Students for Liberty up here in Canada. I got to tell you, if you're familiar with the Students for Liberty organization down in the U.S., it's a great place to get some ideas, some curriculums, lots of different methods and means that you can use to kind of bring that kind of stuff to fruition, because that is really important. And you have to make liberty. It has to be engaging. It has to be exciting. It has to be something that people will just want to get on board with, not someone where you're dragging them in there, just like when you're a kid and your grandparents taking you to church kind of thing or something, right? No, you want people to be engaged and curious minded. And I can't help but think that there's got to be a lot of young people today that are watching all this play out, not quite informed on politics or philosophy or all that stuff, but they're seeing, at the very least, they're seeing a lot of division, and they're definitely scratching their head as to wonder who's right, who's wrong, who's being principled, who's being just, opportunists. And that's something that the libertarians can step up and kind of give them real clarity for that kind of stuff.
And the sad thing is, again, where it's not in the school system at all. And Elections Canada does this student vote thing every year.
Right.
Now, they did not do it in 2021 because of COVID. I don't know what like didn't make any sense. Like you just drop the ballots off and go away. But
Mm.
they did it in 2019. And the scary thing for me is like I'm a numbers guy. I'm always looking at polls. I like when election comes, I'm always buried in the polls and strategy. Students across Canada, if they were the voting demographic and no one else mattered, it was just the students voting.
Mm-hmm.
We would have an NDP and Green coalition. The Liberals would be in third place, and the Conservatives would be in fourth, and the People's Party would be in fifth. So it's like even the moderate right ideas are buried at the bottom. But but kids are not taught. They're not. There's no economic, not to beat the economic drum to death, but there's not even any economic learning in school.
Nope.
And what you're taught, the bare minimum of what you're taught economically is, Keynesian economics. Kick the can down the road. The government will intervene if something bad happens. Well, it's all right if this business fails. The government will bail you out. You'll be okay. It's like the government's there, your crutch, right?
Yeah.
And they like it because it's cozy, it's comfortable, and you get like 3 or 4 libertarians talking, and someone's not a libertarian. You guys are like everyone's like, you guys are out to lunch because they don't know the theory behind it, right? They don't know the value or they haven't read anything libertarian based to see where we're coming from.
Right. Well, I definitely, I will just say too, this summer, and I only got one in before because I was quite busy there this summer with work and stuff. Got my license back and everything. So this year's actually been a really good year for me. But anyways, I did at our local rec center, because in most small rural communities in particular, you'd have some kind of a local place. Like here, it's the local rec center. And you can rent them for like $50, $100.
Yep.
We're already paying for it anyways, right?
We're already paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's another thing. And I just started an idea, and I thought of like, how can you help things without getting into too much problem? But liberty lessons, just for people that are just curious. What does it even mean? What does this liberties mean? What's it mean to be a free human being? Just what are the baseline premises and principles of what that even is? That's something, like I say, that can pique someone's curiosity. And really, when you focus and emphasize liberty, right, which is basically freedom, human freedom and flourishment, right, is at the very least, you don't even have like the party. Well, the beautiful thing about libertarian and liberty is that it's baked right into the name of the party anyways, basically. But I mean, you don't even really have to, play the left-right thing. Because when you talk about liberty, just like I think of when you talk about the young people, right? I remember in 2015 when Justin Trudeau made one of his major parts of his platform was legalization of cannabis, right? Oh, I knew right away that at that junction, whether you're the conservative young guy, right, or the liberal, or the indipper, the socialist, or the Antifa, or if you tend to dip your toes into the cannabis, smoking the weed or anything, you were on board with that. And to tell you the truth, darn well it wouldn't have really mattered which party at the time put that on their agenda. Young people would have supported it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a liberal thing to give people the freedom to smoke whatever weed you want to watch. That's a libertarian thing, and that's the thing that young people that they need to learn. The problem is that our biggest problem that libertarians have to overcome is our message is so suppressed, because the establishment, whether they're from the right and the left, is what they're doing is they're trying to tell their constituents, their followers, their concept and ideas of freedom and liberty, right? And both sides of them doing it. But the reason why their message could even resonate or stick with the people that they're saying it to is because they keep us out of that conversation. Because the minute we could bring our words, enter that into the equation, well, then the young people or whoever it is that's here say, wait a minute, these guys sound way more consistent. There's no hypocrisy. There's no contradictions. These guys. So that's the big thing, is how can we get our message out there? And that's the idea, obviously, where social media predominantly is the place where we can flourish, because the established media is not going to give us any time of day.
No.
And with Twitter now typically, I think you're about the same as me. I think you probably use Facebook historically more than Twitter. And that's usually my case too. But now that Elon is kind of allowing Twitter to open up a little bit, maybe that could be a social media platform that could help in some way now, because at the very least, it's not going to be, highly suppressed, your content. So yeah, that's, and younger people probably would be more apt to do the Twitter thing, because I know even my young kids, like the Facebook thing, they look at Facebook. It's a boomer.
Yeah. And with
Yeah.
Twitter now,
Yeah.
since Elon's taken it over, remember before you had to go through all this ridiculous criteria to get that blue mark?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, now
Yeah.
you pay $15 a month,
Yeah.
and you can like pay. So like if you had like an important message you wanted to like resonate through Twitter, you can pay for the ad, like a boost the ad or your tweet. And even if people don't follow you, they're going to see that message, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I got to
And I
tell
think
you,
it's probably best, when you're talking about like getting into the school system, even if we get, and I know like I have decent ties to some libertarians in the States that have ran for office, and people that are not politically affiliated and they work for think tanks, they'd be willing to, like, as long as you, most would probably do it for relatively cheap. They'd come up here and just talk, right? Like, because, rent a town hall and get them to come up and, sell some tickets, or even, and they people want to hear it, right? There are people that do want to hear it.
Yeah, and actually, that's really important. I'm glad you brought that up, actually, Mitchell, because that's another thing I've been paying attention to. I have mad admiration, once again, for your Jordan Petersons for at least bringing some attention to some of these subject matter that people like you and I have been talking long before he even come to the forefront. Now, he's got the limelight, which is great, though. He's sending the message. But what I have been noticing, and it's the one thing that I'm a little bit disturbed about, is, and of course, he would say he's a conservative. A lot of the Canadian figureheads here that are challenging the status quo seem to predominantly almost universally identify as conservatives. And my biggest concern is for the younger people in particular to grow up thinking that you have to be a conservative to care about freedom and liberty. That's I see, like, historically it would have been the left that would have been claiming that moniker, right?
Yeah.
And now it's the conservatives. But really, we really need to emphasize and get the message out there that the only reason why that's the case is because the left, the liberals, their counterparts, have just dominated in politics for so long, and the institutions, that the conservatives are just desperate to do anything to clamber and get back some of their power. But I'm just not convinced, not yet, and I don't know if I ever will be, that if conservatives now become the new dominant force, that somehow freedom and liberty will all just come. I really firmly believe that it has to be people that place that stuff at the core, not politics at the core, but liberty at the core of your philosophy. Those are the people. And like I say, the only people I've ever recognized in this country are the ones that usually are in the Libertarian Party of Canada. Well, you've probably listened to Tim Moen yourself, and
it's funny because it's funny you mentioned Tim Moen. I've had him on Facebook for a while. I've listened to his YouTube videos, and like, it was when I made my announcement on Facebook here last Friday, I got a couple of responses. People were messaging me, most people I know. And then Tim Moen actually messaged me and gave me his congratulations. And he said he's not too heavily involved anymore, but he's still ride or die libertarian, right? He's not going to drift anywhere else. And, but, back on the, not to bash the Conservative Party of Canada, but with Pierre Poilievre, it's funny because he deems himself a libertarian conservative. He's like a mixture of both. But it's like, again, where was he during the lockdowns? And I don't want to beat to death. I know the lockdowns are all done, but that was a big part of like the liberty message. Well, if you're for liberty and freedom, why are you quiet? Until you become leader, and then everyone was saying we've had enough of the lockdowns. Then you're like, oh, I was against the lockdowns. Like, you went to the Freedom Convoy for a photo op. You weren't there very long. And he knows, and anyone that's been involved in politics knows, his message resonates well in the West. And if you cut Ontario in half, west of Toronto, it resonates. But his message, like, I have lots of friends and other people that were not involved politically ever. They never pay attention to politics. And all of a sudden, Pierre Poilievre jumps on the scene, wins the leadership race, and they're donating to the Conservative Party of Canada, and they're members, and they're voting on things. I'm thinking, he's the same. He knows when that general election comes, which is hopefully not in the spring, but if it goes its full term, he cannot resonate that message. It's not gonna work in the Greater Toronto area. It's not gonna work in Quebec. It's not going to work in Atlantic Canada because anything east of Toronto are red Tories. They're essentially liberal light, and the stuff of him talking about like crypto and decentralization of the bank. It's not going to work in Quebec. And like the pipeline thing, it's not going to work in Quebec. You're going to be in the same situation. Like you're going to have another liberal minority backed by the NDP. He's not a liberal. I've met him. Like, don't get me wrong. He's a nice guy. I've met him.
Yeah.
He does, but he's never had a job. He's a career politician. Right. He graduated school, might have worked for a little while, but then an election come up, was it 12, 13 years ago, I think it was, and he ran in the Ottawa riding that he runs in, and he's been a career politician his whole life.
Yeah, so, well, the back up
is politicians have caused 99, well, I'm not going to be that mean, 90% of the problems in this country have been caused by establishment politicians. That's what he is.
Yeah. Well, what you were saying, to back up, we actually have real world evidence already to back up what you just stated, because that Mississauga by-election there, that was just
Mississauga Lakeshore.
Or Lakeshore, yeah, that was a litmus test to see, if the Torontonians, or the big urbanites in metropolitan Toronto were going to at least give.
And the Conservative candidate did worse in the by-election than they did in the federal election when Aaron O'Toole was the leader.
Yeah, that's quite wild.
And I mean, but Aaron O'Toole is a red Tory. He's not he's not even a conservative. He's liberal. He's a centrist, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Liberal leanings. Like, and I mean Justin Trudeau leanings, not classical liberal leanings.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you something too, because this is another thing that Libertarian Party, I was so disappointed and disheartened at the fact that, because I like I say, once again, I'm not trying to disparage anyone, whether it's your Jordan Petersons or your Julie Panesses, all the Democracy Fund, not even your Conrad Blacks or such. But I find it disturbing, and I actually have it. It's my pinned, because actually I am verified on Twitter there now. But anyways, I have it pinned now on my Twitter. This they had a big event with Jordan Peterson and Conrad Black, and I think the title of the event was "The History of Civil Liberties in Canada." And I find it absolutely baffling, although at the same time, it's like, well, they're still acting like gatekeepers as far as I'm concerned, because to have an event that the whole point of it, the central focus of the event is focused on civil liberties in Canada, and you don't have anyone from the Libertarian Party. That's where, like, they'll even, I hear Julie all the time. She'll say it's the civil libertarians. So you know the word, they exist. So why is it that you would have an event like that and not at the very least
reach out to someone that's actually a libertarian?
Somebody, at least just to show us that,
and it doesn't have to be like someone that's ran for office. There are plenty of people that identify as libertarian that are well read that could go and speak for, a decent amount of time, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tim Moen would be a perfect example. Yeah. He's well versed. He's well read. He's a good public speaker. He fits the bill in terms of like professional attitude. He's not even part of the party anymore, really more. Although a little bit, like I say, he still kind of dabbles in a little bit. But for the most part, he's back to doing his paramedic and firefighting duties and stuff. So he would be a great example of someone in Canada who definitely is well entrenched and understands libertarianism, civil liberties and stuff. And yet, once again, and there's many more examples, I'm just using him as one, but the fact that they wouldn't reach out to one person, like, to me, that's a litmus test for me as a Canadian, right? Is when I know that we're finally getting to the place where liberty is taking the central focus, is when, once again, whether it's the establishment media, the alternate media, or some of these new up and comers, these icons and stuff, start actually talking about things relating to liberty with actual people who understand liberty to the core. Because without that, absent that, I'm still a little bit hesitant in terms of who I support out there. Once again, I'm glad they're out at least doing something. I am at the very least happy that all of these initiatives are at the very least getting people talking.
And, with even like people that would deem themselves, libertarians, and even in the Republican Party of the United States or here in the Conservative Party of Canada, if they get too popular, the party kind of just puts them away, right? They backbench them pretty much. They don't want those, and that tells you if you're for freedom and liberty, and all of a sudden you got a libertarian rising through the ranks and getting popular, and all of a sudden you're silencing him. Are you really for freedom and liberty? Probably not.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
Rand Paul ran, was it the last Republican primary against Donald Trump, and he was doing fine. Even Rand Paul did well. Was it Rand Paul or Ron Paul against Mitt Romney? I don't remember.
Oh, that was, that was back 2012. That was Ron Paul.
And
senior.
And then great, and all of a sudden the Republican Party's like, no, we're going to go with the establishment guy. Like, they kind of just didn't want to do anything with him, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
But libertarian, like, not so much in Canada. I mean, I can think of a couple people that would be libertarian leaning that have held office in Canada, but in the United States, it's a little more common, right? You got Ron Paul, you have Rand Paul, Justin Amash, Gary Johnson was governor of New Mexico. And there are a couple, Thomas Massey. I mean, there are a couple others.
Thomas is great,
but they go under that Republican banner because they know, like the money machine is there. If they run under that banner, they're like, well, you got to get the traction, right? So that's what they do. In Canada, you don't have that option. So like your libertarians tend to stay in the Conservative Party of Canada to push a message, but then they're gone. Right. They can't work their way up. And so you got to kind of go to another party like the Libertarian Party to try to get it done or get a message out there.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And like I say, have you actually maybe you haven't even had a chance as of yet, but I would be curious myself, and maybe I'll reach out and ask them, but did they, I mean, okay, so if the Democracy Fund or none of those folks wanted to reach out to them, but did anyone in the Libertarian Party, maybe there's obviously ways to contact some of these people that are putting on these events, right? Or even just try to communicate them, through a message on Twitter or something. But if they didn't reach out to speak with anyone in the Libertarian Party, did anyone in the Libertarian Party, maybe reach out to see if they would allow them to come on the stage and maybe offer their perspective opinion? Because that would be something, like I say, that would be really interesting because as much as now I was talking about that Mississauga riding, so I'm probably even going to sound a little contradictory here, but that's the kind of thing where I'm trying to gauge and measure where typical Canadian mindsets are at these days. Although that's the thing, to say typical is kind of a misnomer because there's so many different variances. But as much as they did lose the election in that Mississauga riding, and it went to the Liberals, so it's still kind of obviously that riding leans very much.
It hasn't. I don't think it's gone to a conservative since Stephen Harper's first mandate.
Right.
I think
but actually now that I remember, it was very, very low voter turnout. I think it was
27%.
Right. So that's still a very, very tiny. So that really,
most by-elections run between 25 and 35%.
Right. And if you take that, and if you take that as a representation, even because that's just the voting age population, you're talking very small amount of people actually that's determined that. But one thing I did see that's a positive sign, and this is some area where libertarians, like I say, and they actually have a decent foothold in Ontario, the Ontario Libertarian Party and stuff. But did you see the I got to watch it. Who uploaded it to one of the other? Oh, I think it might have been Matt Taibbi himself. Anyways, it was Matt Taibbi and Douglas Murray had a debate it was one of those Massey Hall debates, and they had a debate it was to trust the mainstream media. Do you trust the mainstream media? And there was that Michelle Malkin from the Washington Post maybe, or anyways, and then there was one of the guys from New York Times that were there, and they were debating. And when they started the event, it was fairly close. It was 52% of the people in the audience trusted the establishment media, 48 that didn't, right? But amazingly, I will point out too, and you might be aware, but Douglas Murray is very articulate and really good at defending any message or anything he's trying to say. And of course, Matt Taibbi is no slacker himself. But by the end of that evening, they did such an amazing and exceptional job of pointing out just how terrible. And you got to remember, this is in Toronto. Now, it is people who are willing to go out and at least listen to a debate.
So they're more open-minded than...
A little more open-minded. But I tell you, at the end of the evening, it switched to 67% who don't trust the media to 33 who do. So there was... And the guy that had hosted the event, what's his name? That Heidi guy or something. Anyways, he even said, I believe that was the largest slight difference
Mhm.
in the opinions from the baseline to the end of the debate. So there was a lot of people who were influenced by hearing proper, honest, articulate messaging. And I believe that's what the libertarians bring to the table in a multitude of ways. So it's just a matter, once again, for me, as what I keep coming back to for myself, for any advice to you folks in the Libertarian Party, is getting the message. To me, the message, it's all in getting the message out there, because as much as we all recognize amongst ourselves, it's a great message. And it's just something, like you say, once you learn what it is to be free and how important that is, I mean, you never go away from that. But
No.
there's so few Canadians that understand that message, and it's really important for us to get that. So once again,
And we're not going to get it from, like, it doesn't matter. Like, even like most people, I'm sure, are aware that the CBC is government funded, but it's, it's 1.3 or $1.4 billion a year of our tax dollars go to the CBC, not to mention all their subsidies and all this other stuff they get. So they're not going to portray any sort of message that is not really, Justin Trudeau friendly, really.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And there are, like, at least now, there are smaller media companies that, are open to talking to people. There are, local newspapers are still pretty friendly. But there's podcasts now.
Yeah.
There's, channels like yours that discuss it, and we talk about it. And
right.
There's other ways to get the message out. It's just a matter of getting that message out to the masses in I don't want to say a friendly, compassionate way, but there are some libertarians, and I'm bad for it too. I just spew the heavier, like the more knowledgeable stuff. We got to find a way to, because there's a lot of great minds in the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian Party in the States and those things.
Yep.
The problem we have, and we've always had it, or any libertarians had, is making that message extremely palatable to the general masses.
Yep.
Because a lot of libertarians most of us that are so well read, we're talking at a level up here. We've skipped over, like, we talk about the non-aggression principle, and taxation is theft, and the boot of the government, and we skip out the middle steps of why and how we got to where we are. So we have to find a way to, I don't want to say dumb down the message, but simplify the message and say, like, this is what it means. It's not saying complete anarchy. And we don't expect, like, once, if ever come the time that a Libertarian Party had, at least the balance of power, or there's enough libertarians in Parliament to, actually form some sort of libertarian government. It's not like we're going to just take everything and throw it away. Like, there are gradual steps. Not like, one day taxes here and next day it's gone, right? Like, you would transition down to an amount and then level it there and then readjust it, right? It's not just throw away anarchy and throw away the government and throw away the borders and throw away everything, right? That's what a lot of people think that libertarianism is. It's just complete anarchy. No, there's still law. There's still a government. It is just not boot on your throat government 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're not in your pocket. They're not in your bedroom. They're not against. They're not worrying about your day-to-day life. And the government should not be involved in your day-to-day life. The government should protect the borders, have a strong, like I said earlier in the conversation, protect the borders. And even immigration is questionable of how much control the government should have over immigration. I think there should be a set number. I know most libertarians don't believe that, but there should be a set number of immigration until the country is under control, and then let's reevaluate it. And if it's refugees, privately sponsor them, bring them here. And if you take the responsibility to bring a refugee here, then you're responsible for anything they do, and you're responsible financially for them until they adapt to Canadian culture.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say I'm definitely guilty of, although I've been a lot better in recent times, but basically early on when I did learn, went down that journey, that rabbit hole, right, and learned about the whole thing with the philosophy of liberty, and did, 100% truth of the matter, just amongst us, and the kind of people that's going to be listening to this live stream are probably typically libertarians for the most part anyway. So amongst us libertarians, people that are understandable and knowledge, it's fine to talk about the kind of things like you say that actually, I'll even say right now, like there's no way that you can make a case consistently, objectively, for even the authority that government grants itself, that it's not even legitimate, right? It's not. So,
It's
but
infringement of your basic rights.
right. But like you're saying, and I acknowledge, yes, that kind of talk and bantering back and forth and stuff, that's fine amongst other libertarians. But like you say, if you're talking to someone that is coming out of, the statist paradigm, right? Probably the last thing you want to do is to tell them that their government, right, doesn't exist, because you're really going to they're not going to accept that.
It's not palatable for them, right? It freaks them out. It'd be no different if, and
sure.
it'd be the opposite thing if our society was a libertarian society, and all of a sudden people are trying to tell us no, authoritarianism is a good thing.
Yeah.
We'd be jumping back to and be like, oh, wait a minute here.
Yeah.
I'm leaving. Like I'm going somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So we got to find, like I said, we got to find a way to make it palatable, a little more understandable. And you don't have to like these. And I know I would say a vast majority of libertarians that are extremely well read and do public speaking. They're not even politically affiliated. They're just working for organizations or working for think tanks. And if politics isn't your thing, you don't want to listen to political staffers and politicians talk, then there are plenty of sources that you can go listen to or read that are easily accessible on the internet. Like the Mises Institute is great. The Montreal Economic Institute, FEE is another good one. And they have different levels of reading. So it's like, if you're a beginner, you can say like, I want like the basics, kind of the simple stuff. And then you can like work your way into the heavier stuff if you want to. Like, I don't expect, someone to pick up Human Action from Mises and understand what he's saying, because you haven't read, that's kind of the end game. You're not reading the whole theory. You're jumping right to the extreme.
Oh, okay. We're back.
All right.
Had an issue there. Actually, it's been for the last 2 days. There's been an issue. I think they've sent up a couple.
You switched to Starlink, haven't you? I thought you mentioned that on a previous chat.
There we go. We're back again.
All right.
Yeah. Actually, no. Actually, I found it. I'm glad. There we go.
Third time's the charm.
I know, right? But yeah, so anyways, what I did find out is it's not a lot of the times I have issues with it. It's not my internet connection. What it is on this StreamYard's streaming software that I use, or it's actually right into your browser. But the way they have it is I'm on they has a 1-year plan for $10 to try it out, where you got a bunch of features, but you didn't have to spend too much. But what it is they kind of give you a very low amount of the bandwidth because of the fact that now if I get, and actually I'm going to have to start doing that if I'm going to get back into this, but it'll be great. If I spend $49 a month, which is, I can afford that now. I think now I'm back working and getting decent. So I might just upgrade to that plan, because once you do that, then you have no drop frames. You have and I can stream in 1080 instead of 720 and all that stuff. So it'll be much better. And for these interviews such as this, because it's kind of a downer, because I know for the viewers and for people like yourself, when this stuff happens, it's all right. I'm moving on.
It's happened to me a few times.
Yeah, it's a pain, but I'm definitely going to step it up, because now that I'm getting back into things, I want these things to run smoother, because that's what's going to be more conducive to getting more people to want to stay consistently watching them. But anyways, before we get into too many more issues there, because who knows if it's going to continue this way, at least while we have a few minutes there, take as much time as you need to kind of just lay out, not just your plans, but what any other initiatives that you might want to put going forward, or if other people that you're seeking to reach out to, or anything that even if that you think I might be able to help you with. Because I will say this actually before I do pass it off to you, is I am one of those people, because I am so forthright with my message, and I feel guilty if I start backpedaling. I feel like I'm kind of lying to people. So I'm not very good in the political realm. I wouldn't make a great candidate, right? Probably not, because I just tell too much of that truth, and I
too much honesty,
right? And I get how that can be a detriment, right? So I totally get it. But as far as being someone in the back room, or like I say, in the social media realm, or anything at all, that's one thing. And Tim knows this, and a lot of the other members and of the Libertarian Party, is I'm always here. Just reach out to me anytime if you need any help in any way, shape, or form. That I'm here for you guys and for everyone to kind of try and bring about this message as possible.
I think it's once we start, I'm hoping we can get some, like, in the new year, because if there's going to be an election, I want to get the candidates out as soon as possible, like when we start finding candidates, and then they can come on here and they can talk to you, and you can interview some of the candidates.
Yeah, perfect. Right. I
mean, when I'm in New Brunswick next year, we can meet up, and I'm sure we could find something for you to do in a riding association.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like even just, like doing, little like events or anything, or helping set something up.
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm thinking of. Like even something as simple. I even off the top of my head, I think of like even like local car shows are a thing in the summer, where you could have some kind of a thing, and maybe
just like a booth set up.
Yeah. Booth set up. Keep it light, just kind of, but yes, like I say, I think these kind of initiatives are really important. But like I say, I just want to mention this before you go on, because I noticed that Fraser had actually donated, because actually Fraser, they do a lot of meetups and stuff up in other parts of this country too. And I'm just going to mention here. So just in case you're very busy celebrating Christmas, here's a little present from a fan. Our Freedom Rally goes off tomorrow, the last of the year. Have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Well, thank you very much, Fraser McBurney, for the donation. And once again, I really support your folks' efforts in doing all the things that you can do. And all those little things matter so much. And that's, like I say, something that the Libertarian Party has really got to delve into, is, little pub meetings, or,
grassroots. You got to start at the local level and work your way up and build.
For sure. But go ahead there.
And build strong associations. Like I said earlier, you cannot. It's impossible to expect growth without something at a local level for someone that they can drive an hour to and go see, right? It's just, no one's going to want to drive 3 or 4 hours to see something. So we have to have local events, and there are plenty. I have a plan to roll out in the spring, summer. Once I got to get the riding association set up first, get the membership up, and then once the groundwork is laid, then there will be events locally happening and all across the area. I'm hoping all across Atlantic Canada, but there'll be barbecues, just small events. We got to get obviously money. So people have to, fortunately, part of politics to get a message out is donating. And then, we could even have, you can kind of have ticket auctions and things like that. You got to be kind of how you do them, because Elections Canada is sticky on some things, but
Right.
The message will get out. Like I said, I don't expect, libertarian MPs coming out of Atlantic Canada in the next election cycle. But we got to
Although anything's possible.
Anything is possible. It would be nice, but
Yeah.
we got to get the foundation set up first, get the infrastructure in place.
Mhm.
Once the infrastructure's in place, start planning events, having people, even mail outs. Like, you don't have to go, like, you don't want to go door to door during a non-election time because it annoys the crap out of people. But local associations can put little mail outs in mailboxes, right? Very simple. You don't need to list the whole platform or get into it. You can just list a couple small, like 5-6 word sentences. Here's the Libertarian Party. Here's the basis of what we stand for, and get the basic message. If you want to know more information, go to the website or talk to so-and-so and put their contact information down.
Yeah. And actually, like, even just like you were mentioning this earlier, and I think this is a great idea. So keep that front and center, is, even little fundraisers from time to time to try to bring about some of those people that have name recognition from the US, or even maybe some folks in Canada that do want to, because there's some people out there.
And with technology, even with technology now, you don't even have to, like, have the person in the same building. Like, you could have a Zoom call with a microphone in a like a community center or anything. You could get anyone and just have that person talk, and someone has a question for that person, grab the microphone, have someone walk around with the microphone, ask the person the question over the Zoom call or whatever software you want to use. I have a couple people in mind, and I haven't reached out to them. I'm not going to mention names, but I have a couple inside circles into some think tanks in the States, people I've interviewed myself on my podcast. I'd be more than willing to probably not travel, because a lot of them are in the deeper part of the United States, but at least use some sort of software, get a projector, and just have a live session that way.
Yeah, have some little watch parties, all individualized watch parties of people. Yeah, because that's the thing. That sounds like a really good idea, because that's basically what we're seeing today in terms of, like, the ones who are challenging the status quo, the big names with your Jordan Peterson. It's those big events that are the draws, and it gets people thinking and talking. They get them all hyped up, and then they go home, and darn well they're going home and they're talking to their friends and their family, say, "Oh, you can't imagine how much fun and how much I learned from this event." And that's, once again, we got to kind of get ourselves in that limelight as well, because I firmly believe that the ones that have the most consistent message in terms of the kind of things, and that's the thing. It's not just a matter of, I hear a lot of people, like even the ones that are challenging the status quo, how this current system is bad, but I don't hear it really hearing a whole lot other than we want freedom of speech. But I'm not hearing a whole lot is, okay, if you get rid of this, what do you got to replace it? Right?
Yeah.
Libertarians have that in spades. They got all those answers already for that.
And it's been that way. It's been that way for 50 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I definitely think you get some really good ideas, and knowing that you're going to do, because I know, based on our past interaction, I know you're very dedicated, committed. And to me, it wouldn't matter. I know you're a good person, and you have the right heart and the right ideas, and it didn't matter. Even though I had some fallout with some PBC folks, you definitely weren't one of them, because I can recognize a person that has the right ideas, the right mindset, and I will support anyone. To me, because at the end of the day, the goal for all of us, I believe, is just get a little breathing room from this massive amount of statism that's just been imposed, and
it's getting worse. It's not. There's no. The Fraser Institute had an article probably a couple of weeks ago. The only province in Canada that you don't lose half your money to taxes is Alberta.
Yeah.
Like, people in California complain about their taxes, and it is high. It's like 47%, I believe. They'd be the least taxed place in Canada, and they're the highest taxed place in the United States.
Yeah.
If you live in Atlantic Canada, it's pretty similar. 51 to 53% of your wages or your income is gone.
Right.
Between federal tax, provincial tax, I may as well say inflation is the hidden tax. Now the carbon tax is coming July 1st.
Yeah.
Cost of living is not getting any better because they keep printing ungodly amount of money with no backing for it.
Right.
So our buying power is down. It's the government, like people are saying, well, the government they'll put another policy. The government, the way it's set up currently, is the reason we're in the mess you're in.
Yeah.
Like that'd be like if you and I were next door and you had a baseball bat and you kept on breaking my windows, and I went over to you and said, well, can you fix my windows? Well, yeah, you'll probably go fix it, and then you'll just break it again. Like that's the simplest analogy. They're not here to fix it. They're here to keep you just comfortable enough where you think you're free, but you're really not free. Not from how a libertarian would deem freedom and liberty, that's for sure.
Yeah, and by sheer fact, like you mentioned, if taxations are at such exorbitant levels, and Canadians are willing to put up with that, which obviously they are, because there's not people out rioting in the streets anywhere.
No.
So it tells you that obviously the typical Canadian, the average Canadian, is somewhat generous in terms of, helping other people. So once again, if that's the case, if people aren't rioting in the streets because the government's taken over half of their income, well, just think if they had that income to actually disperse it as they see fit to benefit communities in the way they want it to do. Well, then once again, that puts the power back in the people, and it makes sure that all that money that's being taken from you is actually going towards what you want it to go to. So that to me, it's a good thing. So the people that advocate for higher taxation levels, or they want their free healthcare, what it is you just gotta, if you're willing to spend a tremendous amount of your money, well, why do you need the government to
disperse your money?
To proverbially put the gun to your head, right? Yeah. Well, just take that money, right? And we live in the information age, and moving money around is not that difficult, right?
And that's
put that money to use and make sure that it's going to the purpose where you want it to go.
And the thing here locally, I saw, was it this week, that Tim Houston, who is the premier of Nova Scotia, is giving, I don't know if $1,000 or something about free. It was something, I'm not sure. I think it was like, if you're low income, he's going to give every house a free heat pump.
Right.
Free.
Yeah. Free. Already.
It's not free.
No.
Like if anything that the government says is free or it's government funded. No. They just reached in your back pocket and they're just taking your money and throwing it somewhere else.
Yeah. I got a guy that we paved his house there. He runs a company here in Fredericton there.
Yeah.
That installs those things. And you know what? I've never heard him say he gives those things away free one time.
No, and they're not cheap. I think the cheapest one I've seen is like $3,000. Like they're not cheap.
Oh no. Well,
and people think, and this is what annoys me the most. And I've beat this drum to death with it, like talking to my friends and my family and people at work. The government is not promising you things because they care about you. They are promising you things because in 4 years, when you go to that ballot box, oh yeah, he put a heat pump in my house 3 years ago. Check. Yeah. They don't give it. They don't care. And that's what people are like, oh, I've had stuff we've had a conversation, stuff I've been told privately, like the names. I care about people, but it's the answer is not the government to provide everything to you, because it's not the government's. It's not in the government's responsibility to provide really a whole lot other than like what I mentioned earlier in the call. And there was a thing I saw on Twitter, and this is from the left. This is actually someone I follow on Twitter just to see what's going on, to stay on both sides of the spectrum. He's a Joe Biden staffer. Okay. And he goes off and says, oh, they've spent $858 billion on the military budget, but they can't give students free lunch. I'm like, it is not the government's. Now, the military budget is outrageous. There's no reason it should be $858 billion. But let's be realistic. The Democrats have always voted, and Republicans have always voted for interventionism. They want to go to war because it's the military-industrial complex. They don't give a damn about any other country other than their own benefit, really. They're not pushing liberty. They're not pushing democracy. No. It's imperialism. And they're like, you can't give them free lunch. It's like, it's not the government's responsibility to provide children with lunch. That's the parents' job. Yeah. Maybe if you lower taxes, they could afford to actually feed their children. Just an idea.
Well, that's why I've always been, there's so many forms of taxes, and I'm against all taxes, but that's, to me, the income tax is the most detrimental tax other than inflation. But the income tax, because like you say, what it does is it gives everyone and in some way they're partially right, but it gives every citizen of every jurisdiction that's taxed the actual kind of a legitimate excuse to say, well, listen, someone took my money, so I want, at least if I can vote for someone that's going to give me a little bit of it back, right? That's so in reality, you can see the logic in people and the reason why they vote for the Liberals or the NDP or whatever party's offering the most freebies, right?
Well, that was
And even if
earlier. That was earlier today. I think it was what MP is it? Seamus O'Regan. I might be getting the name wrong. He made this tweet. Oh, because of the new dental plan, 100,000 kids have gotten free dental care. And I'm like, it's not free. Someone's paying for it. And
yeah,
not to be cynical and mean, but it's like, it's not my responsibility to pay for someone else's children to get dental care. Like, get dental. I know it's not cheap, but again, there's a reason it's so expensive. The government wants it that way.
yeah.
Like, it's not my responsibility to worry about someone else's children's teeth. It's not. Like, it's sad that it's unfortunate those kids have to live that way, but it's not my responsibility to look after someone else's children. Although, Bennett, your video, I can hear you, but your video is frozen.
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Huh. Well, anyway, as long as you can hear me.
I can hear you.
But in terms of that, like you say, well, the problem with when someone's taking your money and you're trying to get some of that back, what the libertarian message should be is that, so let's say they're saying, what do they say? You get $650 a year in terms of that dental coverage, right?
Yeah.
What they're not taking into account though is now you're looking at an extra layer of bureaucracy that's going to implement that particular program, and which is going to absorb and soak up a lot of that. So at the end of the day, if Canadians actually understood that $650 that you're going to get in the here and now is not a whole lot different than if you went and bought your $100 thing on your 30% credit card.
Yeah.
Right. It might only cost you $50 now, but if you don't make that payment next month in fall, well, that $30 or $50 thing is going to end up costing you,
and the
3 or 4 times that at the end of the day. So your teeth cleaning, you might get $650 now, but at the end of the day, it might end up costing you $2,000 to get a $650.
Yeah. And I do understand why it is, like, it's palatable and it sounds nice that the government's going to do this for you, but they don't see the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is, if the government's going to subsidize that dentistry to do the work, they're probably going to, I don't know if it's happened yet, but it would make sense. They're going to jack the price up on people that aren't low income. So they're going to be paying now more for dental work. And then your taxes are going to go up one way or another, right? So, I mean, no one wins other than the people. Like, society does not win that way. It's like, okay, well, we'll get free, but we'll just let you pay for it. And now that you have, like, if you're in the next tax bracket, you're in middle income, if they jack your dental up and they're not eligible for any sort of government subsidy, then can they afford now to give their kids the dental work that they could afford 6 months ago before this plan was in place? Probably not. Like, it just kicks the can down the road. Someone else is going to front the bill, and good luck is really what it comes out to.
Exactly. And since I don't know what's going on with my video, but since it is kind of acting up anyways, what I'll do is just for this last little bit there, and then we'll tie it up. I'll let you finish, like, just say whatever you got to say in terms of whatever you want to get out there. I'll just put you on the screen, and then I'll jump in real quick, and then we'll tie it up there.
Okay. Yeah, just kind of what I covered earlier. My plan is to get the riding association set up all across Atlantic Canada in the new year, and then go out and meet as many people as possible that are libertarian minded or curious what libertarianism really is. Bennett has all my social media handles, so I'm sure after we're done this interview, then he can post that in the comments or in the description. And then if you have any questions, reach out to me. If there's anything that you want to know about the Libertarian Party of Canada, you can go to libertarian.ca. The platform is there. And then you can learn more about the party. Like I said, I'll be hopefully traveling late spring once all the snow is gone. I don't really feel like traveling through the snow. So once the snow is gone, I'll be traveling, getting riding association set up. And if you have anyone that's libertarian minded or wants to know what it is, wants to get involved, we definitely need people to get the message out and boots on the ground. It takes more than a couple people. It takes a lot of people to get a message out, and we have to do that by volunteers and getting grassroots movements set up and strong riding associations is the only way to get it done.
Excellent. Excellent. I still don't have my video, but anyways, thank you once again, Mitchell. And I just want to say, probably won't get a chance to talk to you before then, but Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you. And the same goes out to anyone that's left watching this stream. I really appreciate you folks for joining us. And like I say, you know, we've taken some bumps and bruises over the years and we're still, that's the thing. We're fighters. We care about liberty. We know how important it is. So we're just going to keep pegging away and doing what we do. And go ahead.
And one other thing, I've heard a couple people kind of say to me, well, if you hate the government so much, why are you in politics, or you're just in politics to get rich? No, I have no ambition to become rich off of politics. If it leads, down the road to a full-time job, I'm not going to gouge. I take a large salary. It would be a reasonable one, but I'm not going to be, filthy rich off it. I'm not in it to get rich or to get famous. I'm just in it to get what I believe the best message and values out are to everybody. And so anyone that is still watching, and Bennett, everyone have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and enjoy the time with your family. I know it's very important. Family is the key to society outside of one's beliefs to spread a message.
Yeah. Let me just say one thing to answer your, in terms of the money thing. If anyone's listening, as if Mitchell was in it for money, I would have already recommended long ago, you might want to go to the establishment party, because that's where all the money's at.
That is where, so that's where the money is. Like I have, and I'm not going to mention who or where they're at, but I have friends that have, worked their way up to the establishment parties, and they're making a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. So libertarians are definitely not in it for the money.
No,
we're in it for liberty. And it's selfish too, because as much as it helps other people, but it's for our own liberty as well. We care about the people that we love, and we want our kids and grandkids and family members and future generations. We want them to grow up. We want to pass that torch of liberty on.
It's just a different perspective. It's not lack of caring, because a lot of people think that libertarians have a lack of caring. It's not lack of caring. It's the way we want to show people we care is to let them be free, let them to run their lives, and any private, any money you want to have that is not being taxed away from you, like with the policy, not to go back to policy, but then you have that money, right? You have the freedom, you have more disposable income to do what you want with it. And that's the biggest thing. It's not, we don't care. We don't want anarchy. We want limited government and more freedom for everybody to live their life. So, out of marriage, get the government out of marriage, and just get them to do the bare minimum that they need to do, which would be the Charter of Rights and the Bill of Rights, which should be reformed with no clauses in it, so they can't just choose what they want to follow, because that's also led us down a road of more authoritarianism. They don't follow the basic papers that were given to Canadians as our basic rights.
Exactly. Well said, Mitchell. Well, anyways, like I said, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Sorry, folks, for the bad quality here towards the end, but at least the audio is working, and we got I think some really great points put out there. And like I say, I'm very appreciative of Mitchell and everyone else in the Libertarian Party for everything you folks do, and I'll be looking forward to 2023 and seeing what we can do in terms of bringing freedom and liberty back, or at least to the forefront.
Or to the forefront.
Canada. Yeah, right on.
Thank you, Bennett.
Have a good one, folks. Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
It's Canadian Libertarian.